Welcome to Phenomenon Radio, the show that covers thought-provoking breakthroughs in the fields of UAP UFOs to discover fascinating truths, first-hand accounts, and investigative insights into the expanding confluence of physical and mental exposure to this worldwide phenomenon. Hosted by Emmy Award-winning investigative journalists, Earthfiles reporter and editor, Linda Moulton Howe, and world-renowned experiencer of the 1980 Rendlesham Bentwaters incident, John Burroughs. And now, leading off tonight's program, here's Linda Moulton Howe.
This week, on October 17, 2017, the Daily Interlake website based in Kalispell, Montana, reported that, quote, a well-known Bigfoot researcher and his investment company are on track to build a $25 million multi-story hotel complex in East Glacier, Montana. The complex will house the largest Bigfoot museum in the world, along with a live theater, conference center, retail store, restaurant, and lounge. Construction is expected to begin in early 2018. The East Glacier, Montana area is allegedly a Bigfoot migration route, according to researcher Tom Biscardi. He is behind this new Montana construction because he now wants to work from the Bigfoot Museum and Hotel and be able to lead Bigfoot expeditions into the East Glacier, Montana region where Bigfoot are supposed to live. Currently, Biscardi is president and chief executive officer of Bigfoot Project Investments, Inc. He has produced several films and videos about his investigations of the 8 to 12 foot tall Bigfoot Sasquatch creatures that eyewitnesses over the decades have described as being more like thick-haired humanoids rather than gorillas. Eyewitness descriptions of the hair color range from a dark reddish brown to really dark brown to black with silver hair running down the humanoid backs, heads, and faces. I have a 1978 audio tape of a couple of silverbacks standing at the fence of a woman's property in Snohomish, Washington. As she stood on her deck with a tape recorder in her hand, the 12-foot-tall silverbacks, as she called them, made very high-pitched sounds for several minutes as she recorded. Bigfoot investigator Tom Biscardi says one Native American in the region shot a Bigfoot because he felt the creature had been harassing his family. The bullets took the Bigfoot creature down to the ground. Biscardi said that soon, quote, another similar creature came out of the woods and cradled the wounded Bigfoot in its arms and then carried it off, close quote. So from Snohomish to this area in Montana, these big hairy creatures have been seen in various styles and proximities, but the big hairy Sasquatch creatures are not confined to North America. 16 years ago, on June 25th, 2001, I arrived in Hong Kong to meet a video production team producing a TV series for the Discovery Channel entitled Modern Mysteries of Asia. The subjects were very tall wild men that villagers on the border between Laos and Vietnam were reporting that summer. I was hired to investigate and report what we could find. I had audio with me from that 1978 Snohomish woman's recording of the tall silverbacks. When I played the high-pitched recording for the villagers who said that they had seen human ape-like wild men reach up 14 feet high to branches for food, those eyewitnesses nodded their heads when they heard the eerie sounds from my tape recorder, saying yes, that they recognized that sound. I also learned that an Asian studies professor at the Australian National University in Canberra, Australia, have been studying the wild men in Vietnamese history. He reported that as far back as the 1st century AD, there were references about very tall apes in the far south of China. A Ming Chinese dictionary mentioned a yellow-haired ape with a human face and human feet. Another Chinese dictionary also described a 12-foot-tall red-haired ape with a human face living in southernmost China that was known to attack humans and eat them. Then, in late 1968, during the Vietnam War, the professor learned that a U.S. fighter jet pilot had ejected when his plane was going down from gunfire. The pilot fell in his parachute into a tree above a river, badly wounded and semi-conscious. Searchers found him still hanging in the tree, barely alive, and on the ground were 2 dead North Vietnamese militiamen. When rescuers cut the pilot down, he was alive long enough to say, quote, "It was a big gorilla that had killed the 2 Vietnamese at the base of the tree," close quote. The big, hairy Sasquatch Bigfoot humanoids have also been seen in western Pennsylvania, where longtime researcher and author Stan Gordon produces the website UFO Anomaly Zone with a 24-hour UFO hotline at phone number 724-838-7768. Stan has been investigating high strangeness creatures, UFOs, and flying humanoids for decades. This coming weekend on October 20th, Stan will be featured in a new documentary debuting at the Creature Weekend Conference in Ohio and at the Balboa Theater in San Francisco, California. The title is Invasion on Chestnut Ridge, about the famous UFO and strange animal creatures that have been encountered so many times on Chestnut Ridge in western Pennsylvania, only a few miles southeast of Pittsburgh. Some of those Chestnut Ridge cases range from the December 9, 1965 Kecksburg UFO crash to the early 1970s reports of UFOs and Bigfoot in the Uniontown area that provoked residents to wonder if the tall, hairy Bigfoot were actually aliens from outer space. Stan has shared his extensive research and investigations in 3 books. His latest in 2015 is entitled Astonishing Encounters, Pennsylvania's Unknown Creatures. Before that, he produced Silent Invasion, the Pennsylvania UFO Bigfoot Casebook, and Really Mysterious Pennsylvania. After this short break, Stan Gordon will join Phenomenon Radio, and we will begin with a recent incident last month on September 20th, 2017, not far from Chestnut Ridge, where a small UFO hovered outside a bedroom window.
It's AJ with Vibes, Mind, Body, Spirit. The Vibes Tribe seeks to assist you in creating and maintaining an uplifting and balanced state of being in your personal space. Palo Santo is a mystical tree that grows on the coast of South America. Palo is loved by many for its energetic cleansing and healing properties and is also popularized for its heavenly presence in keeping your energy grounded and clear. Burning Palo provides an uplifting scent to raise your vibration and is also beneficial for relieving stress, anxiety, depression, and emotional pain. Palo Santo is also known for relieving symptoms of the common cold, headaches, and asthma. We offer Palo Santo in resin, powder, or by the stick. Go to onlinevibes.com for all of your vibration elevation needs and receive a free stick of Palo Santo with any online purchase over $25. Shop onlinevibes.com, that's onlinevibez.com, and get your vibes on today.
Around the world for decades have come high strangeness reports of mysterious aerial lights, beams, animal mutilations, human abductions, secret space and military programs focused on an alien presence. One reporter of these Earth mysteries is Emmy Award-winning TV producer, writer, and editor Linda Moulton Howe. She reports and edits the science, environment, and real X-Files news website, Earthfiles.com.
We are moving from the paradigm that we are alone in the universe to a new one in which we are not alone, and something out there is interacting with us, our animals and plant life, forcing glimpses of other realities upon us.
Linda has produced 4 large books about these phenomena with hundreds of color images and illustrations that reviewers such as New York Times best-selling author Jim Marrs describes as an amazing accumulation of evidence. All her books, An Alien Harvest, the 2-volume Glimpses of Other Realities, and Mysterious Lights and Crop Circles, along with documentaries, are available in the shop at earthfiles.com.
We are the contact for alternative research topics. The Planet, KGRARadio.com.
Thanks for joining us right here on KGRARadio.com for Phenomenon Radio Live, heard exclusively every week here on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern. Everybody, get ready for tonight's very special guest, Stan Gordon. We've got him here on deck. And here's Linda Moulton Howe to begin tonight's interview. Linda?
Hey, thanks, Race. And Stan Gordon, welcome back to Phenomenon Radio. It is just great to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me back on the program.
And you know, before we go to a month ago in September in Pennsylvania, I'm really curious about what you yourself have learned about the so-called wild men rock apes of Laos and Vietnam.
Well, this goes back many, many years ago from memory, but I remember it's probably early 1970s, I would assume, that some of my high school buddies who were in the service, they knew of my interest in these strange reports, and they were telling me about their experiences over in Vietnam with what they called the rock apes. And from what I recall, I remember one of them telling me about the fact that they believed that these creatures could pick up an individual scent from an individual person, individual soldier. And so there were situations where some of these creatures were seen in certain areas, and they would send out groups of soldiers because they didn't want these creatures to be able to pick up an individual scent. They wanted to have a group of people there to confuse them. But I remember that because I always thought it was kind of interesting, but that's probably all I can remember at this point.
Well, and while we were there, working through translators, we were getting all kinds of fresh stories when I was there. And the description, there were people who were saying, here's the branch of the tree, that something had to be at least 12 foot high up to their head, and then an arm that could reach up to 14 to 15 feet high limbs. That's how big these are. They're amazing.
Well, yeah, it is amazing. I can tell you, going back to the history of Bigfoot sightings in Pennsylvania, I've been out in the field investigating, reporting since the late 1960s, interviewed hundreds of Bigfoot witnesses, worked on multitudes of cases. And, and I'm sure we'll get into it tonight before we're done with the program, but there's a lot more very strange aspects of the Bigfoot phenomena. And while a lot of your typical Bigfoot reports are generally in the 6 to 9 foot tall range, as I'm sure you're aware, there are reports of smaller ones being seen, but also there have been some reports where these things were much taller, around 12 foot tall. And I remember one case I went down to investigate near West Newton, PA, where there's been a lot of history of Bigfoot activity. And this was back, I believe, in the 1980s. And the woman went out to her back porch. It was a swampy area around where she lived. And she had left some plants out there on the back porch, and she was afraid they would be damaged from the frost. So she went out to get them. And when she went out on the porch, only a few feet next to her, maybe 8 feet away, was this huge Bigfoot standing there on the side of the porch. And she startled it, and it startled her. And the woman had 3 dogs, and they just ran to the corners and wouldn't make a sound. And there was an overhanging branch from a tree. And she noticed how the top of that head was touching the top of that branch. And when I went out there the next day to measure it, it was 12 feet off the ground.
Yeah, exactly. And that would be like the wild men in Asia. And we are now talking in the third week or so of October of 2017. And I know that you have been covering a big landscape of a lot of high strangeness in Pennsylvania. And I was really intrigued at your website by something that happened only a month ago, and it is described as a small UFO hovering outside of a bedroom window. Could you go into that particular event?
Yeah, well, this happened not far at all from the Chestnut Ridge. And that Chestnut Ridge, by the way, runs from about 100 miles long, approximately, from Preston County, West Virginia, through Westmoreland, Fayette, and Indiana County. And it is, without a doubt, probably one of the most active areas year after year, including this year, for UFO encounters, Bigfoot, Thunderbird sightings, Black Panthers, other cryptids, mystery booms, objects going up and coming down from the sky over the ridge, all kind of phenomena goes on. And that's the reason that Seth Breedlove over there, Small Town Monsters, decided to produce this documentary, which you mentioned is coming out this week. But this incident happened in that general area, and it's an area where, again, all kind of phenomena is going on, and I'll tell you more about some even more recent reports. But this woman was awakened early in the morning, around 3 o'clock in the morning, and she noticed a light from outside of the bedroom window, and there was no outside lighting there. Shouldn't have been anything out there. So she got up, and she looks out the window, and she said, suspended in the air about 6 or 7 feet from the window and about 8 to 9 feet off the ground is this very odd-looking object that's very small in this case, only about the size of a silver dollar in diameter. And she said the color was odd. It was kind of yellowish and pale green. And the light was steady, but it did glow, but it wasn't that bright. And it didn't emit any light that reflected on the surrounding area. And she said that this object, whatever it was not completely round, but more like if you had a circle, it was flat and it was more egg-shaped. And on the left side, she said there was a small section that it was like missing a part, like it was a dark area where there was no light coming from it at all. And she said she watched this thing hovering there for about 15 minutes, and all of a sudden she got real tired and relaxed watching this thing, and she fell asleep. But it was still there when she had gone to sleep. And these little mini UFOs, as I call them, are fascinating. I've been investigating them since the 1960s. And many, many reports, and there's similarities but differences. And tonight we'll talk about some of those as we get into the evening, I'm sure, of a more recent case. But some of these are only a few inches to a foot in diameter, generally spherical, but there have been some reports of being more elliptical, but still small in size. A lot of the spherical ones, they're either kind of solid or they're transparent, translucent. You can see through them. Very intriguing are reports we've had over the years where they've entered people's homes and cars through open windows. One of my favorite stories I remember from years ago was up in northern Pennsylvania, where a woman told me she was in her kitchen one morning cooking when one of these little spheres came in the window, was floating around the room. So she grabbed her broom and struck this thing. And she said it split into two identical little spheres. They floated around the house. They went out the window, and that was the last she saw of it.
So she made one fear into two. What I wonder, Stan, in this age of drones and all kinds of military operations that are using smaller and smaller technologies, is there anything about, let's say, this current hovering little mini UFO that had a dark area that you think would be distinguishable from something that humans would make?
Well, again, first of all, these reports go back many, many years ago, long before we even thought about drones. And some of them are very interesting. The majority of the drones, at least reports we've had in more recent years of the man-made drones, they make a lot of noise. This thing was completely silent, for one thing. And they didn't see any type of propulsion system. There's no type of motor or anything along that line. So they're kind of fascinating. I remember one case just a few years ago in a beautiful afternoon up near State College, Pennsylvania, where a fellow was driving his nice truck down the road at pretty good speed, and he had the window down on the passenger side of the vehicle, and all of his hearing notices this round spherical object, I believe it was about as big as a tennis ball, if I recall, and the thing entered into the cab of his truck. And it floated all around, it floated right up to his legs, floated all around, and finally it just went right out through the bed of the truck and disappeared. And some of these cases are just very, very intriguing and appear to be far different than any of the man-made drones that I'm aware of.
Yeah, you're making a good point about the many drones that I've been around, and especially the ones that, let's say, Ancient Aliens, we've done a production where we're using them for camera, and they're down close to us, and they go up really high and all over, and you can hear them. It doesn't matter how high they are. They make a lot of noise. So if something were completely silent, that is a characteristic that is worth reporting.
Yeah, definitely. And we hear about these small ones. I mean, they're still being reported over the last several years. And you don't hear about them as much, but very interesting. And another thing that's kind of interesting, and we'll talk more about this, I'm sure, again later, is these mystery firefly-type objects. And I started writing about them back in the 1970s. And more in recent years, and I'm getting reports not only from Pennsylvania but throughout the country from many people in the Bigfoot field and many areas where there's a lot of history of Bigfoot activity, that a lot of researchers and people who are out searching for Bigfoot are seeing these strange luminous objects, and some they describe as looking similar to fireflies but acting completely different than fireflies. And these little mystery lights keep showing up more and more in areas where Bigfoot activity has been reported.
And are the I know what a firefly is. It would be about the size, let's say, of the fingernail on maybe your middle finger. Are we talking about the same thing, that these would be a lot of little glowing objects around the Sasquatch?
Well, I can give you some. One thing that's kind of interesting is that some of the people have told me they've seen these, whatever they are, that they actually light up the area around the object itself. They illuminate the surrounding of it, whereas as you see the flash on a little firefly, it doesn't do that. And I've got a very detailed report here that happened July 1st of this year up in Fayette County. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about Fayette County because it's along the ridge and it's very active with all kind of activity. And we had a significant UFO incident up there last year, which we can get into. But there have been a number of Bigfoot investigators up in this general area. This is off of Pike Road up in Fayette County. And some odd things have been reported up there. But on July 1st, now this is a report I got from one of the people among the group who was there. One of the other witnesses I talked to agreed that some of it is very similar to what he saw. He interpreted a little bit different, but it's a very detailed report. If you'd like me to go over some of the details, I'd be glad to.
Yeah, and to try to explain to our listeners what the differentiation is that you are now beginning to understand between, let's say, fireflies in a backyard in Philadelphia versus what people have seen around Sasquatch, or this case on Mud Pike Road.
Well, this will probably go into some of that, as we discussed when I talked to the witness. And what this goes on to say was that they're out there that evening, and they parked along the area, and they noticed that there were no fireflies in the woods, as we had seen while sitting on the road nearby. Within a few minutes, it looked like a very bright firefly on the opposite side of the road we were sitting. And then within seconds and minutes, another firefly illuminated the hillside at the road level. Notice how bright the light emitting for these fireflies appear to be as compared to the ones that they're used to watching in the backyard. And also, these fireflies were flashing 5 to 8 rapid times in dark. And as they were watching and discussing what they're watching, they could see what looked like a swarm of fireflies moving towards them deeper in the woods. Within minutes, hundreds of fireflies came to rest at road level and on the hillside on both sides of the road. We walked closer to the fireflies. We noticed that not all the fireflies seemed to be either flash 5 to 8 times in unison or simultaneously, appearing like a massive Christmas light decoration. And he said it was kind of hypnotizing. So they watched this for an extensive period of time, and he decided to walk closer to the swarm, but it seemed as if they would move slowly just out of reach. And after a while, they decided to walk back to their chairs and watch from a distance. The firefly-type things literally moved to the hillside above us, but never came down to where they were sitting. And After a while, the swarm moved back to the road, then up to the hillside, and back to the road from where they first appeared. We did notice that one or two of the fireflies remained on the hillside in a tree located behind us. The characteristics of these were very different from the average firefly, which we're used to catching as kids. He said he would guess that the light emitting was a 1.5 inch in length, that these fireflies flashed 5 to 8 times rapidly as compared to a common firefly that did one slow pulse. All these fireflies seem to emit a bright white neon light as compared to the amber green dull light they're familiar with. And also they moved in a swarm and they seemed to avoid contact, and kind of interesting. Now, I talked to some other people familiar with the wildlife and with the insects, and they could explain some of these things, but one thing was kind of interesting was how that they seemed to illuminate the area around them, which was kind of interesting. So it's something that's been reported for years, but it's interesting. We're getting more reports of similar type of small little lights like this in areas of Bigfoot activity.
It is interesting because I have read articles about more advanced American military applications in the drone world, where they are now getting little drones down to the size of something like a fly, a housefly. So now we are challenged by how will we be able to know if a swarm of rapidly pulsing white lights that sort of look like fireflies are actually insects or are a modern military spy technology.
And wouldn't that be interesting if we learned that maybe the military was interested in these reports and maybe using the technology to study the phenomena in the area? We can speculate for a long time. There's a lot of things we have no answers for.
Well, okay, now give me the date on this Firefly report.
That was July the 1st of this year.
Okay. Now we are talking on October 19th, 2017. And as I understand it, you have had something occur just in the last day or two.
Yeah, actually, I got a call from another researcher a couple of days ago, and this fellow gets a lot of information on incidents from the Chestnut Ridge going up over to the next ridge, Laurel Ridge, and up through Indiana County and up through Cambria and Somerset counties in that general area. And he just called me to see if I've been receiving any reports, and I told him, yeah, there's been quite a lot going on for weeks now. And he had been getting some other reports too. Now, of course, this is what I'm getting secondhand, but generally he's pretty good with reports and information he gets. And he did mention that more recently, in more recent weeks, he's been hearing reports of mystery booms up in those areas, up towards Somerset County, up through the mountains of like 5 to 6 booms that are shaking the area. He also had reports out towards the Blairsville area. And now this was an interesting one. He said on October 12th he received a report. Now this would be several miles outside of Ligonier, which is not far again from the ridge, Chestnut Ridge. And this person reported seeing a thunderbird, a huge bird that they said looked like a giant hawk. But they estimated it was 10 to 12 foot wingspan, and saw this huge bird flapping its wings, but heard no sound, even though the witness thought that they were close enough they should be able to hear the sound of flapping wings. But the strangest detail he brought up was that the witness said that this huge bird appeared to be transparent, that she could see through the shape of the bird.
Wow.
And that's something that I'm receiving more and more reports on over the years now of various cryptids that suggest, reluctant as I am to say it, that in some cases some of these creatures appear to be something other than flesh and blood, which is why you never find any bodies, possibly.
Well, Stan, it is becoming, I think, more and more prevalent. I know Jacques Vallée and I were talking about this just a week or two ago, that he did that book, Dimensions, a long time ago, a couple of decades ago. But now other dimensions are beginning to be in science journal reports all over the place. that we are moving into the next half of this century where it seems to me that what is going to be, I don't know if the proved is too hard a verb, but we're moving in that direction where non-human intelligences move throughout the cosmos precisely by going out of the dimension into another dimension, like a pool shot, and coming back at some other place in the universe. And that the idea that that there are intelligences with technologies that can fold space-time and or move into one dimension to get to another place in the next door dimension. That is becoming the discussion of quantum physicists. So if that's what's happening in the human physics category now, let's just project that we are dealing with intelligences that pop in and pop out, and that's why people see them switch off like lights, or they say, I've heard this many times myself. This was a quote from a man, he was out hunting. He said, "This was a silver disc, Linda. It was a silver disc. I would have said it was solid metal." And then right in front of me, it began to change and it became more and more translucent and then transparent, and then it was gone. Almost as if it was being demonstrated for the human. Look, watch. This is how we move around.
Yeah, and again, these kind of reports are becoming much more common. It's not just with UFOs, but with cryptids. And I've had many cases over the years of even in daylight what appear to be solid physical craft, not lights in the sky, not orbs, but solid craft that physically change form in front of witnesses, or they suddenly appear and disappear. And then something I noticed years ago is that there were some instances where, for example, there would be a group of people, and only certain people within that group are describing watching this object hovering nearby, and other people couldn't see it. So is it possible that certain people have certain abilities that they're able to perceive certain phenomena other people can't, or could the phenomena be attracted to certain people? There's so much we just don't know.
There's a third category, and it has been discussed by some of the people who worked on things like MK Ultra and remote viewing at Stanford at SRI, and that is that we may very well be dealing with intelligences that know how to tune in to a specific brain frequency. And it wouldn't matter if it is 10 people or 1 million people. And we'll call it the alien intelligence, can telepathically communicate thought words or place images or binary code or anything into an individual that is standing right next to a whole bunch of other people who don't get anything, because the alien intelligence knows how to transmit directly to very specific brain frequencies.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And you did ask me about what happened last night. Well, I don't have a lot of detail yet. I'm still getting more information. But what I understood was that some men were hiking up in the Laurel Ridge area last night when apparently they saw a number of small luminous objects, orbs, and they were down near a high-tension power line. And apparently at some point, one of the witnesses swears, and he was pretty shook up, swears he saw this huge dark shape, maybe 10 foot tall, that appeared to come out of the orb and take big steps and walk off into the woods. So that's all I know right now, and I'm hoping to get more information on it.
It's so classic. Stan, this is what we hear from places like Bhutan and Tibet, where I have a book about the so-called high strangeness in the Himalayas. And there is one particular case, and it was described by a Westerner who was there on some kind of a trip, and in front of them was a ball of light that suddenly was on the path in front of them. And then, to their complete shock, the ball of light seemed to do 2 or 3 rotations or spins, and then it unfolded into a man who seemed to be a little bit aged, actually, and that was wearing exactly the clothes of the other Tibetans that were walking on the path. And that made it into a book because the observer was so shocked that the light could turn, and somehow out of the turning light emerged what they thought was a full-fledged human continuing to walk.
Yeah, the reports are just getting stranger and stranger. And, we may have talked about this in the past, I'm not sure. I have a new lecture I do. It's called Strange Aspects of the Elusive Bigfoot. And I get into a lot of areas that a lot of people never heard of with Bigfoot, and a lot of people probably would prefer not to know about Bigfoot because it doesn't fall into the category of what they want to believe. I always felt that Bigfoot was probably an unknown primate, an unknown animal when I started investigating those reports. Well, I started actually researching back in 1959 when I was 10 years old. Then I got out in the field, and after Kecksburg, I began to do firsthand research, and I've been out in the field ever since. So this year is 58 years of research, and I've never seen a UFO or Bigfoot myself, but I've seen a lot of evidence over the years. But over the years, especially with that massive wave of 1973 and 1974, and many cases since then, there's a lot of data that we've seen that, as reluctant as I am to say it, Bigfoot may not be what a lot of people think they are. They're real, but not in the sense that we understand it, but they may be something other than flesh and blood, and for a lack of a better term, interdimensional might be what we're dealing with.
Now, can you go into all of the evidence and data and speculations that you have about the high strangeness of the Sasquatch Bigfoot phenomena and all of the things that you consider that might make them interdimensional?
Well, yeah, we could talk for hours about this probably. Yeah, going back to some of the cases I had in 1973. 1973 and 1974, we had the biggest outbreak in history of UFO and Bigfoot cases here in Pennsylvania. And it went on for weeks and months. It was making a lot of news at the time, not like today, but it was making a lot of local and even national news on investigations. Back in 1970, I had founded the first of 3 volunteer research groups. That was the Westmoreland County UFO Study Group. And it was kind of unique in that the majority of people involved were specialists. There were scientists and engineers, research people. We had police officers. We had former military intelligence people. We had all kind of people. We all were doing this around our regular jobs, but I had it set up that we were responding to cases 24 hours a day. We started out small. By 1973, we had expanded to cover the whole state of Pennsylvania. To our surprise, we were beginning to get referrals from various agencies, the news media, the state police, and we are getting a lot of reports in. And then this major wave comes around, and we are being inundated with reports. There were hundreds and hundreds of UFO cases all year. And many of them were not just lights in the sky. They were large structured craft hovering over highways, following cars. There were landing reports, sometimes with physical traces on the ground. It was amazing. And then we had the massive Bigfoot outbreak that occurred in the summer of 73. Went on for weeks and weeks. And many of those sightings were in daylight at very close range. And when I say close range, we're talking 5, 10, 15 feet away from witnesses where, for example, they walked out in front of cars, they walked near mobile homes, they were seen in rural areas, very, very close range. Some cases, there was more than one creature seen together. So people got a very good look at descriptions of these things. And in a lot of the cases, our teams would get out there, or even the police department in some cases, and there would be physical evidence at the scene. So we're documenting all this as it's happening. But all these weeks go by, all of these reports are coming in. And remember now, 1973, there's no internet, there's no cell phones, there's a whole different time period. And so a lot of people initially called the police to report these incidents. We began to see some very odd things begin to show up, having always felt that Bigfoot was a primate, an unknown animal. One of the things was that there would be trails of footprints that would suddenly stop and disappear when there should have been more tracks, even in cases of snow, fresh snow, even in recent years, where there were trails of tracks that would just suddenly stop and vanish. It didn't make any sense. Then we began to get some very odd reports. I remember one is in Derry Township, and you'll hear me mention Derry. That's along the Chestnut Ridge outside of Latrobe, PA. It's been active for years and years with Bigfoot, many sightings even in recent years. It goes on all the time. But I remember one case where a man had come into the local police station, and the police had called me about it, and they said this guy was very sincere. I believe it was he and his wife were riding down the road. I believe it was between Millwood and Hillside, if I recall. And the man told the officer, here's this huge, hairy creature walked out right in front of my car, and I hit it. And he said upon impact, it just physically disappeared. It was gone. That wasn't the only case we heard like that. There were other strange things begin to show up. One of the things was we began to see a pattern. We would have, for example, a UFO sighting in a particular area. Within minutes to hours to days later, we would have a Bigfoot sighting or vice versa. And then we began to have some of those amazing, well-documented cases with UFOs and Bigfoot seen together at the same time and place.
Right.
One of the cases was up Beaver County north of Pittsburgh, September 27th, when two young ladies were waiting for a friend, and they see this huge, hairy creature with white hair. You know, you don't hear about the white ones very often, but they are reported, and it's running across the road towards the woods, but in one of its hands, it has a glowing ball of light. And as it runs off into the woods, a short time later, this object comes across the sky and projects a beam of light down into the woods where the creature ran into. That's just a small example of what we began to find, and I can give you some really detailed, very weird other accounts.
Well, Stan, do you think that, let's take the case of the man who hits on a road with his car what he thinks is a large, hairy animal, and yet it disappears. It isn't a body on the road. Is it possible that that is a sophisticated kind of hologram, that we're dealing with alien intelligences who interact with, upload, download information from humans and wildlife all over this planet and have been for millennia by using holographic projections that most of the time the human mind cannot tell is a hologram?
Well, once again, many, many theories out there, and a lot of these things have been brought up over the years, but we just don't have the answers yet. And there were so many things that were going on with these creatures, and so many things we found out about. Here's another thing that's not well known, for example, with Bigfoot. Just like even some of the early low-level UFO cases, when these objects would hover over cars, for example, there would be an electromagnetic effect where the car would lose power. The lights would go out, the radio would go off the air, the object moved away from the area, and everything came back to normal. Well, there were incidents where the same thing happened with a Bigfoot sighting. I remember one case back in the 80s, two people riding down a rural road in western Pennsylvania, and all of a sudden, both of them said it wasn't there, we just came upon it. This huge, hairy Bigfoot creature is suddenly right on the edge of the road. They had to swerve around it to miss hitting it. Its arms and legs were so big, it was hanging out over the road. And at that exact moment, and they gave a great detail what this thing looked like, the power in the car was almost gone. And the passengers yelled at their driver, hurry up, get out of here. And the harder the driver would push down on the gas pedal, the slower the car would move. And finally, as it slowly moved down the road, when it got away from the creature, all the power came back on and worked normal. That's just an example of some of the reports we were hearing.
Right, and then that reinforces the possibility that some of these big creatures that people have impacted, and there have been others that I've heard where they've hit and then it disappears. There was one famous case out of Malmstrom in Montana. And this was a rancher who reported to the Cascade County Sheriff's Office that he was up in the morning to go hunting and had a 30-06 rifle. And when he came around a ridge, that here was standing, though his description was 8 to 9 feet tall and reddish brown. And he said, quote unquote, in the official report to the sheriff's office, it looked like a gorilla standing in front of me, only big. He, without hesitation, lifted up his 30-06, shot, and this big creature disappeared in a flash of light. And I saw that typed in the Cascade County Sheriff's Office offense report. Disappeared in a flash of light. Stan, what else can it be except something like holographic technology?
Well, then let me give you a similar case, which is the case that convinced me that we were dealing with something more than flesh and blood. And this was February 6, 1974, during that massive Bigfoot wave back up in Fayette County along the ridge, close to the ridge, up near Ohio. And I'm sure some of your listeners remember the time period. There was a big national trucker strike going on. There was gas rationing going on in the country. There was some violence going on the roadways. So back in Pennsylvania, the state police and the National Guard were patrolling together. Well, they both responded to this incident I'm about to tell you about. I couldn't get up there till the next morning because I couldn't get any gas locally. But what happened was this woman lived in a little cabin home way up deep in the mountains. She lived there all her life. She knew animals well. She was a very good shot. And she was sitting there as normal that evening watching TV when she heard a commotion on her little front porch. She had, there was some empty cans of pop out there. Somebody was knocking the cans around. And a few weeks before, there was a pack of wild dogs coming through, so she figured probably those dogs are back there. So she thought, you know what, I'll grab my shotgun and I'll just shoot over their head and scare those dogs away. So she loads one chamber of her shotgun, and she walks over to turn on the switch on the wall to turn on the front porch light. And she walks out, opens up the front door, steps on the porch, and lo and behold, there's no dogs there, but only a few feet in front of her is this huge, hairy creature, 7, 8 foot tall, with its arms straight up over its head. And, you know, the many times I interviewed her, she never, ever called it a Bigfoot. She said it looked like a great big hairy ape. And what did she do? She fires her shotgun right into it. She said there was a bright flash of light, like the flash on a camera, and it disappeared right in front of her. Her in-laws lived 100 feet away. They heard the gunshot. They called her on the phone. That's what she was shooting at. Her son-in-law grabbed his sidearm, his pistol, started walking up that dark road towards the cabin, saw a figure running down the road. As they got close, he said he was surrounded by 4 or 5 hairy people with eyes like coals of fire, started shooting at him, ran into the home, the cabin home, and it was about that time that they were looking out the window, and there's this huge, very large object, like a big Christmas ornament with lights on it, hovering over the woods at the same time. And that's when they called the state police. And when the investigators got up there, something odd had been taking place. Whatever there was gone by the time they found it way up in the mountain. But I talked to the primary investigator, and he said something very weird happened up there. And that he based on how the animals were responding. And that's something I have seen. And I said a long time ago, you can fool people, but you can't fool the animals, especially the dogs. When in many cases, when the dogs are at a distance from these Bigfoot creatures, they carry on, they bark, they're very, very upset and excited. But generally, when they're close by, even the most ferocious dogs are just like paralyzed. They won't bark. They cower, they hide, they act very, very strange. And that trooper told me, he said, when they got up to the scene, they had numerous dogs there. Dogs wouldn't make a sound. The horses and the cattle were all frightened. They were all acting unusual. When I got there the next morning, everything was back to normal. That was the case, among others, that indicated to me that we're dealing with something much stranger than any of us probably wish we even knew. There was much stranger than just a flesh and blood explanation, at least in some of these reports.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And now let's jump again to the year that we're in, 2017. You've been getting reports this year. Have you gotten any in the Sasquatch Bigfoot category?
Yeah, there's been a number of reports from around here in western Pennsylvania. I'm hearing a lot of secondhand reports from different people. What I run into is the fact that I've talked to people who are friends or relatives of people who are seeing things who are still reluctant to come forward to talk about it because they're not able to deal with the fact that they saw what they saw because they never believed these things could exist. And so some of these people sometimes they wait a while, if ever, reporting their sightings. Some people waited years before they talk to me about what they've seen. But there have been a number of sightings that have been reported. Like I said, even recently we've heard some activity. There was one report, actually, is very interesting. This would have been up in Luzerne County. This is up in PA, up towards the New York border in April of this year. And this was a beautiful afternoon, 6:30 evening. This woman and her friends, they were riding their bikes, I believe, was looking for wildlife because they lived in an area, there's a lot of wildlife, there's a lot of bear around, so they're all very familiar with what bear look like. And this one woman, her hobby is to take photographs of the wildlife. So she always she had a little inexpensive camera with her when she was riding around that day. And her friends that afternoon, they had rode ahead, and she was sitting there. She noticed about 100, 150 feet away along the edge of the woods across the road from her, she saw movement, and she thought it was a bear and some cubs. And she said as she's watching, suddenly this huge creature stands straight up from the ground, and she said her first thought was it was a gorilla. She said it was 7, 8 feet tall, covered with very long hair. The hair was black with a reddish tinge to it. The arms were very long. The head was shaped more like an ape. She couldn't see any facial features, and she noticed no unusual odor at all. But she said when the creature rose up, it had its hands stretched straight up over its head, which we've heard on different occasions.
Right.
And then it moved its arms down and placed its hands, one on each side of the face, and held them there. And she said the creature turned and with large strides walked off into the woods with the hand still on its face, and it was walking bent over with the head almost down to the knees, gave the witness the impression that this creature had been hurt in some way. And when it got into the woods, she heard the creature make a loud, like a ooh sound, like it was hurt. She only heard it one time, and she never saw it again. Well, she did take 3 photographs, but unfortunately, 2 of them were completely distorted. They were out of focus. The one does show something, but it's not detailed enough to be sure what it is. But anyhow, there was something there along the tree line, and she said her and her friends returned to that area several times over the next several weeks to see if they could see it again, but they never saw it again. So that was a kind of interesting report. In May, up in Cambria County on a back road, a man called me, and he was very reluctant to even talk with me, you could tell. Said he was an experienced hunter. He had never believed in Bigfoot before, but he said he's riding down the road at dusk, and he noticed there's something standing on the side of the road, and as he got closer with his high beams on, he realized this was not a person. It was about 75 feet away. He said it was huge. He said well over 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, covered with dark hair and long arms and legs. He couldn't see the face or eyes. He said the creature looked towards the car as he approached it, and then ran off through the high grass and moved off into the woods and disappeared. And that's just an example of some of the reports we're hearing. But we're also getting reports that are even much stranger. And, in fact, there was a Bigfoot sighting only several miles from where I live here in early August of a Bigfoot encounter. And this witness would never have reported it. It's just that by coincidence, he happened to mention to a neighbor about what he had seen, and he asked the neighbor if he'd ever seen anything strange in the woods nearby, because they had both lived all their lives, and he said he hadn't. But when this guy told his neighbor what he saw, he said, well, you should call me. So he gave him my phone number, and I went and interviewed him and looked around that area, and guy told me that, again, it was about dusk, and he's sitting out there looking at the woods, as he does, relaxing, and he said he heard like a sound of wood cracking, like something heavy stepping on heavy limbs, and there's a clearing through the woods, and about 40 feet inside the woods, in the clearing, he saw the clear silhouette of a man-like figure about 8 feet tall or larger. He said you could see it was covered with hair. He said it was hard to tell. It looked maybe dark brown. He said he only saw it from its left side. He said it had a mighty big head and saw no neck. It had a very large build, tall and thick arms that were longer than the human. He only saw it for several seconds as it moved deeper into the woods, and he could not see it any longer. He did not notice any smell or sound. And He did say that a few weeks earlier he heard a loud sound coming from those woods, like somebody hitting hollow logs with a heavy stick.
Well, you know, we're coming up to a break. And after this, what I'd love to pick up with you, Stan, is how can the Bigfoot Sasquatch phenomenon walk across a wooden deck? And this, I have many reports like this. Walk across a wooden deck, people see them walk across the wooden deck, and then they do something or try to shoot it, and the creature either runs off or, in the cases we've talked about, disappears in a flash of light. But then the humans realize that on their wooden deck are scorch marks of the feet. The scorch marks of the Sasquatch has always been a big puzzle in this whole issue of, are they organic? What are they? And then let's also pick up on the other side of the break, this fascinating story that you have from August about the police officer who encountered the strange creature with a glowing head in Pennsylvania. Thank you so much. Just stay there. We'll be right back.
Thank you, Linda. This 45-minute uninterrupted segment of Phenomenon Radio is brought to you by OnlineVibes.com. Your personal connection to mind, body, and spirit, committed to helping you with healing modalities that can manifest a true and healthy change in your life. And I guarantee a lot of us could use a lot more of that. Visit the website at OnlineVibes.com. That's OnlineVibes with a Z.com. Tonight's very special guest, Stan Gordon, will rejoin the show right after these messages. Stay with us.
UFOcongress.com is where you go to check out the Guinness World Record's largest UFO conference. The next event is going to be held February 14th through the 18th, 2018. At UFOcongress.com, you'll find out why so many people go to the UFO Congress. It's because we have the best speakers, the most amazing venue, and very affordable prices. Don't forget the website's UFOcongress.com. We look forward to seeing you at the next International UFO Congress.
Hey there, quick question for you. Would you be okay with more energy, more endurance, thicker, healthier hair, a better mood, reduced appearance of wrinkles, improved sleep, improved blood pressure and cholesterol profiles, improved vision, improved memory? Okay then. Well now, have you heard of Nature's Youth RSF? It's from the anti-aging experts at nature'syouth.com. nature'syouth.com. See, at Nature's Youth, they understand exactly what it means to provide top quality health products. And Nature's Youth customers not only improve their health, they know they're also providing their body with the right nourishment to maintain that peak performance and fight the aging process. If health, wellness, and nutrition are what you desire, choose Nature's Youth RSF. I did. You see, you're going to get older. It's just up to you how you feel when you get there. Get started today. Nature's Youth RSF. Simple to use, simple to order. Go to nature'syouth.com. That's nature'syouth.com. nature'syouth.com.
For the thousands of wounded warriors returning from battle, Wounded Warrior Project has developed the Warriors to Work program, a career counseling service that helps wounded warriors translate their military experience to a civilian job. These extraordinary men and women bring more than just teamwork and inspiration to the workplace. They bring proven world-class job skills. And to ensure proper placement, Wounded Warrior Project works with employers to find just the right job fit. Talented, skilled, and eager to get back to work, you have the opportunity to hire a seasoned veteran. Contact Wounded Warrior Project at findwwp.org. Welcome home the brave.
Hi, Hi, this is Matt Ray for My Pillow. Look, I'd forgotten what a good night's sleep was like. Then I got a hold of My Pillow. I used to wake up with neck and shoulder pain. I thought it was the new normal. But after one night of using My Pillow, my neck and shoulder pain is gone, and I'm sleeping comfortably through the night. My Pillow's patented interlocking fill conforms to your personal sleep needs. It's guaranteed not to go flat. It's washable, it's dryable, and it's made in the USA, not to mention the 10-year warranty. Try it risk-free with a 60-day money-back guarantee. What have you got to lose besides back pain and shoulder pain? Right now, America's First News has a great deal. Try it for yourself. Call now. You'll get 50% off a 4-pack. That's 2 premium pillows and 2 travel pillows. Call now, 800-716-4835. Use the promo code RAY, R-A-Y. That's 800-716-4835. Use the promo code RAY.
Your contact for current news and trending topics. KGRARadio.com.
Thanks for joining us here on KGRA DB, the Global Radio Alliance, Van Buren, Arkansas, Salt Lake City, Utah. It's wonderful to have you all join us tonight for Phenomenon Radio Live with our very special guest, Stan Gordon, back once again. Before we get back to the interview, it's time for the news brought to you by Earthfiles.com. Here's Linda Moulton Howe. Linda?
I lived near Doylestown, Pennsylvania, north of Philadelphia, from 1993 until 2004. In the first 3 years, the trees around my house filled with gorgeous fireflies every summer. And then, by 1996 onward, fewer and fewer showed up. By the time I moved to the West in November 2004, there were scarcely any. I had even called the University of Pennsylvania Entomology Department to ask why the fireflies were disappearing, but no one had any answer. Now, this week in the October 18th, 2017 science journal PLOS ONE, a recent Netherlands study reports that insects are disappearing from German nature preserves at a shocking rate. Ecologist Casper Hallman at Radboud University, east of Amsterdam, studied numbers of insects collected in 63 German nature preserves between the years 1989 to 2016. In those 27 years, the biomass of flying insects decreased by a seasonal average of 76%. And yet, each of those 63 nature preserves are supposed to be protected areas. Professor Hallman says this decline is very alarming. Originally, there was suspicion that global climate change could be the cause, but warming temperatures should help insects, not kill them. So what is behind the massive disappearances of insects, not only in Germany, but in many parts of the world now? Will this be a steady decline toward insect extinctions? No one yet knows for sure. But for all of you listening to this Earthfiles news report, if you have seen a big decline in fireflies, butterflies, bees, and other flying insects wherever you live, please email me, earthfiles@earthfiles.com. Think of a reporter who files news about the Earth. So again, my email address is earthfiles@earthfiles.com. This is Linda Moulton Howe. Please stay tuned to Earthfiles news updates on KGRA Radio and visit every day my science, environment, and Real X-Files news website, earthfiles.com, for more on breaking stories about our universe, this solar system, and the planet we live on.
And that's the news brought to you by Earthfiles.com. Now back to the program.
Hi, Stan. Before the break, I was posing this question. What do you think about some of these data points that have come up in reports where people have seen a big Sasquatch, Bigfoot, walk across their wood deck, and then the creature might disappear or run off, and the people are stunned to see burned scorch marks 14, 16 inches long in their wooden deck.
Well, again, another interesting phenomena. And, you know, if you talk to researchers around the country, as I've done since the 70s and around the world, actually, I found even back 40-some years ago that there was a lot of strange aspects of the Bigfoot phenomena that a lot of people were not talking about because, one, a lot of the researchers had these kind of reports, but they were reluctant to publish them because they didn't want to get in trouble with their peers who always believed that Bigfoot was an unknown animal of some type. And a lot of the witnesses are reluctant to talk about it, but there's so many anomalies associated with Bigfoot throughout the country and around the world. And something I brought up is the fact that with the footprints, you know, in the United States, Pacific Northwest, California, different areas going back years and years, and some people may or may not be aware of this, but in a lot of the areas where you had your typical five-toed footprint, you also had three-toed footprints show up, and occasionally even four-toed tracks showing up. It's the same thing here in Pennsylvania, especially during the 73, 74 outbreak. You had a lot of three-toed tracks, but you also had your typical five-toed tracks. But over the years, not only do you have the three-toed, the four-toed, and the five-toed tracks showing up, and still showing up at times, but there's a whole series of other very strange footprints that have been showing up. And these are cases where we pretty much were able to eliminate that these were fabricated or hoax tracks. We've seen hoax tracks, and I had a lot of different specialists. We had a podiatrist, we had an anthropologist working with our group over the years. We had police officers working with us. So we were out there, and you could tell in most cases pretty easily what tracks are real and not real. But there are also a number of tracks that are not consistent with what you generally see, even though some of the tracks I've seen here in Pennsylvania are similar to ones, for example, I've even seen in China. And but there's variations on the tracks. So that just brings up another whole part of the mystery. I mean, it's hard enough to believe that you could have one type of unknown specimen running around out there, but how can you have multiple different types of these species or something if some of these other tracks are real? And then to go even stranger, I've heard reports from other researchers. I talked to some witnesses who have told me that they followed a series of footprints that suddenly would change it to a completely different type of track. I mean, that even adds more and more to the mystery.
What about the scorching? And I'm thinking specifically of a case that I probably learned about this in the mid-'80s, and it was in Pennsylvania. It was up in a forest. I don't remember where, but the sound was on a porch, and there were two women in this kind of cabin house. And they also, like the case you had, they had some kind of a shotgun. And they went to the door together with their shotgun because they didn't understand what the noise was. When they opened up the door, standing there was this huge, as they said, like a gorilla looking like a human. And they raised up their gun. I do not think they shot, though. And the creature seemed to turn and disappear going down the steps of their deck. They stressed that it seemed to be disappearing in the air as it went down the stairs, which scared them. And then after it was gone and they had the light on, they're looking at, as they said, it was as if this thing could scorch with heat and left these prints right on the wood. Can you even speculate about this whole idea of the Sasquatch phenomena leaving scorched tracks in wood?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't recall any of the cases I worked on. I've heard of those stories. I have not worked any firsthand, so I haven't seen that type of evidence. it's really amazing stuff. The more you get into these phenomena, that, again, there's so much of this we just don't understand. And you're talking about how these things move so quickly. Well, that's something you're hearing more and more about with various cryptids on the ground. The witnesses are telling you it's here and it's gone. I mean, I had cases go back years ago in daylight where, example, the witnesses are standing there. There's a Bigfoot on their left side of them, ahead of them. Instantaneously, it vanishes and disappears, and momentarily it appears on the right side of them in a different location. It's here. They come and they go. They're here and they're gone. Some of the people say the agility of these things are amazing, but they move so quick that they can't even understand how they can move that fast. It's like it's just here and they're gone. And this is not just with Bigfoot. It's some of the other cryptid reports we're hearing as well. And it's just fascinating. You were talking about this police officer encounter. Well, even that's been brought up with whatever this officer saw recently.
Okay, and you've got this at your website, and you call it Police Officer Encounters Strange Creature with Glowing Head in Pennsylvania, and that this was late August 2017, so this is only a few weeks ago. Can you go into this in some depth?
Yeah, this happened. The officer was on patrol. I'm just saying it was in the southwestern section of Westmoreland County because, of course, he doesn't want to be identified. And what he told me was that he's on patrol. He's patrolled this area very commonly, and he's riding down this rural road, and he sees what appears to be a ball of very dull white light low to the ground. And he thought that was kind of unusual because he's not familiar with any type of artificial lighting in that area. And as he moved close to get about 50 yards away, he said this round light suddenly rose up or stood up from the ground. It was then they observed something that he just said he couldn't understand, he couldn't process in his mind. He said it was the weirdest thing he had ever seen. And he said the ball of light was actually the head of a very strange being that looked to be about 6 feet or taller. And he said it was tall and very skeletal thin. And then he said he was of the opinion that the creature, when he first saw it, that had been lying on its belly on the ground with its head facing towards the road. It then stood up facing the road. And it was a dark area, and he said the dull light from the glowing head illuminated the upper section of the body of the creature. And as he watched it, the creature turned to the right, and the dull illumination from the head lit up the shoulder area, and the creature turned and faced him, then turned to the left and took off at incredible speed towards the location away from the road. As it moved off, the witness could see its arms swinging. He said he indicated that it took off at a speed that you only could call abnormal. It was faster than anything he had ever seen. He said it was there and then it was gone. The same thing we've heard from other people. And the witness assumed that the creature moved on two legs. However, he could not see the lower section of the body. It was dark. He couldn't see the legs. So he said this thing is standing about 6 feet or taller. The head was about 8 to 10 inches in diameter, shaped like a ball. But he said the head was just a ball of light and possibly more of an egg shape. He said the light emitted to be just a dull white light. The light illuminated the shoulders, the top of the chest, and a section of the arms. The witness could not see the hands. The chest looked to be about 18 inches across. The waist appeared to be small, but the arms were abnormally long, and the long limbs looked skeletal with no muscle mass. The skin tone appeared to be dull grayish blue, and he could not see any facial details. He said he watched this thing for maybe about 10 seconds. He said he was so confused as to what he saw, about how it could move so fast, and he pulled up his vehicle to the location where the creature had been, and he turned on his vehicle spotlight, searched around the grass in the area. He looked around, but he saw no evidence on the ground. And the officer told me he just could not figure out what he had seen. So it was a very interesting account, and it's not something you hear about every day. But interestingly, it was about a week ago, I get a report from another person who lived in the northern part of Westmoreland County, and this person doesn't even have a computer, wasn't aware of any other kind of activity like this. It was actually a friend who encouraged her to call me, and this person was taking a walk at dusk, and this is around the third week of September, so this occurred a few weeks after the police officer sighting. and she was taking a walk around dusk, and she sees this figure approaching from across the road, thought it was a neighbor taking a walk. As she looked, she realizes that it was not a neighbor, but a strange being that a basic human form stood about 5'8". She said what she saw scared her a lot. The head of the creature was egg-shaped, wider at the top and narrow at the bottom. The color of the creature was odd and gave the impression it was sickly and in poor health, that it looked to be kind of a light cream to ivory color. What frightened her was that she could not see any facial features except around what would be the mouth. She noticed what seemed to be a wrinkle down one side. She saw no eyes, nose, or ears. The body appeared to be thin, but wider around the shoulders, about 20 inches across. The witness could not see any arms. The legs were straight and thin, but they seemed to be bent outward from the knees. She said it was hard to explain, but they appeared to be something odd about the legs. They were separated, and one leg seemed to be different than the other one, as though it was being dragged. And she said, even stranger is that the body seemed to be covered with what she described as bib overalls. They appeared to be dark blue or charcoal color. The creature made no sound. She noticed no odd smell. She said the creature seemed to be watching her a short time. A short time after she saw it, she noticed some people starting to approach the area, and the creature suddenly disappeared very quickly and went into the tree line. She said she had no idea how it suddenly just got back into the tree line. And when the other people moved off, it reappeared again. This time the creature was about 35 feet away near the woods and appeared to be looking at her, and it took several steps in her direction where it approached to about 25 feet. The witness said she became very frightened and had a bad feeling and ran to her home. The witness said it felt like that there was some type of purpose, but she didn't know what it was. There were no dogs or pets in the vicinity. Before she saw the creature, she noticed a strange screeching sound coming from the woods. She thought at first it was an owl. However, she knows the sounds of the owls in the area, said this was different, and it seemed to be very loud and steady, and it sounded quite upset. So, if you look into the details of the report, it's quite similar in many ways to what the officer saw.
Yeah, and this whole idea of the human getting the impression of the being sick, was there any suggestion that she was getting telepathic thoughts, words, or symbols in her mind from whatever this was?
Well, not brought up. Nothing I could see when I talked to her extensively. So that has not been brought up.
Okay, and the egg shape. I'm thinking of the LAM, that lamb character that goes back to like the 1800s when Aleister Crowley talked, and he drew that creature that he called lamb that he encountered when he did some sort of special meditation, and he referred to it as an extraterrestrial with the head bigger at the top and narrowing sort of down but not pointed chin. If that's similar to this, that Aleister Crowley illustration goes back to 1800 and something.
Yeah, very interesting. And you bring up telepathy. This is another area of Bigfoot that I've rarely come across in Pennsylvania. I mean, I know there's cases of, and there are people around the country, out in California, different areas. We've heard from people who claim to have had pretty much constant contact with Bigfoot. Well, these cases in Pennsylvania, you hardly ever hear about that. And there's only been a few cases that I can think of where these were people who really had no interest in Bigfoot. They had their encounter. They were pretty shook up over the encounter, which had never happened. They very reluctantly told me that they had the mental impression this thing was trying to communicate with them. But there was one case that stood in my mind because of what happened, and I was at the scene. And this was many years ago. Again, between Latrobe and not far from the ridge, Chestnut Ridge. And there have been a number of Bigfoot sightings in the area, and various people had seen it. And our teams were out there investigating, interviewing the people. And I was with a group of people that night standing there. And this one person who apparently had a history of some paranormal abilities and psychic abilities was telling me that this creature, this Bigfoot, appeared to be trying to communicate. And that night while we were there, the creature had mentally communicated to this person that tomorrow morning, the next morning, up in Homer City, up in Indiana County, which is about 15 miles away, that there would be a UFO incident. And lo and behold, early the next morning, there was reports from Homer City, and actually made the news, if I recall, that people around there were calling about a strange sound, that is very loud sound over the area that he couldn't identify. Some people thought it was an aircraft was in trouble, but there was no aircraft in trouble. Nothing was missing. And it was actually serious enough that the fire departments went out and searched and couldn't find anything. And I always thought that that was a very interesting event.
Yes, and I'm also wondering about the whole idea that you could have holographic entities, you could have something that's organic placed on this planet for monitoring purposes that might be out of tissue, as we know tissue on this planet, but designed specifically to be upload-download technology in an organic form. And then, Stan, you go to all of the so-called flying humanoid reports that have been in Pennsylvania over the years. And in your website, you've got one from this year of January 10th, 2017, of a flying humanoid reported in Kentucky. And I'm thinking about this big box of holograms and other dimensions, because you start taking all of these complexities and saying, how do they leave scorch marks? How do they have glowing heads that appear to be translucent? And are we dealing with a myriad of some kind of technology for an intelligence that wants to be able to interact with Earth life forms without scaring us? But the human always has a gut sense about whether they're in front of something that is positive or negative. And that seems to be a strength of humans, but raising the question, are we dealing with holographic technology in most of these reports, including the flying humanoids?
Well, you know, in some of these cases, again, you do have some physical traces, some of the sites. One thing I found years ago, it's still ongoing very commonly. Many low-level, close-range UFO sightings commonly occur in the vicinity of energy sources. So do close encounters with cryptids. So I have many reports of encounters with Bigfoot, the Thunderbirds, the huge flying creatures that continue to be reported even recently, Black Panther sightings, these floating entities you're talking about, the winged humanoids, all these weird things that people reporting commonly occur around high-tension power lines, power plants, gas wells and gas lines and radio towers and lakes and reservoirs and railroad tracks and windmill farms. It goes on and on and on. I believe, and I've said this for years, I believe that there's an energy connection to the phenomena that we're dealing with. And, you know, again, what it is, we don't know. There's a lot of these reports, again, along the Chestnut Ridge. And there's been all kind of reports of all kind of oddities up there and people seeing, you know, the balls of light. And there's been reports of different areas of people actually seeing balls of light change into creatures. And I believe you've had some of those reports.
Yeah, and as we were talking about earlier in the show tonight, from Tibet to other places, it's very clear that these luminous balls are a technology, and that even in that one case where you had a Sasquatch that was holding a sphere, that is almost as if there is some kind of what we would call, if we carry flashlights in the woods, that we are dealing with phenomena from God only knows where, that the spheres, these glowing spheres, seem to do everything: transport people, perhaps generate energy that maybe causes fear among humans. And you know what I'd like to do is hold this thought of, while we take a break, and when we come back on the other side, let's go into the details that you have on the flying humanoid recently in that Kentucky area in January, and some more on these flying humanoids that have even been being photographed in magazines recently.
Be sure to check out Linda Moulton Howe's Earthfiles YouTube channel for weekly reports on the latest in science, the environment, and real X-Files. Also, visit the award-winning website earthfiles.com with over 2,000 in-depth reports that go way beyond the 6 o'clock news. That's earthfiles.com. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be right back for the final segment of tonight's program on your contact for alternative talk radio on the planet. You're listening to the Global Radio Alliance on KGRARadio.com.
For years, our listeners connect to the KGRA on various platforms like TalkStream Live, TuneIn, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and many more. Now, you can stream your favorite paranormal talk radio shows with our new fully integrated custom KGRA mobile apps for Android and iPhones. Listen to your favorite paranormal talk shows from any mobile device 24/7, free with smartphone or tablet. Utilize custom features to access news, show pages, archives, contests, events, and live interactive chat room. Set show notification alerts and never miss your favorite live programs. All free and available to download in Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Around the world for decades have come high strangeness reports of mysterious aerial lights, beams, animal mutilations, human abductions, secret space and military programs focused on an alien presence. One reporter of these Earth mysteries is Emmy Award-winning TV producer, writer, and editor Linda Moulton Howe. She reports and edits the science, environment, and real X-Files news website, Earthfiles.com.
We are moving from the paradigm that we are alone in the universe to a new one in which we are not alone. And something out there is interacting with us, our animals and plant life, forcing glimpses of other realities upon us.
Linda has produced 4 large books about these phenomena with hundreds of color images and illustrations that reviewers such as New York Times best-selling author Jim Marrs describes as an amazing accumulation of evidence. All her books, An Alien Harvest, the 2-volume Glimpses of Other Realities, and Mysterious Lights and Crop Circles, along with documentaries, are available in the shop at earthfiles.com.
I'm getting older and noticing that my body just doesn't work as well as it used to. So I like to keep fit as possible by hitting the gym a few times a week. Recently, I started having a nagging bicep pain, and it got so bad I couldn't even lift the weights. When I was complaining about it to a friend, he told me about angioprim. He said chelation helps remove toxins, heavy metals, and cholesterol in veins and arteries that may cause blockages. You know, after just 1 week of taking angioprim, the pain was gone, and now I'm back in the gym full strength. Scientific research proves the active ingredient in angioprim has superior oral chelation action that helps promote cardiovascular health. So to learn more, go to angioprim.com. That's ANGIOPRIM.com, or talk to a trained consultant. Call Angioprim toll-free at 877-882-7221. You'll feel better with more energy. Call 877-882-7221 or go to the website angioprim.com.
Hi, it's AJ with Vibes, Mind, Body, Spirit. The Vibes Tribe seeks to assist you in creating and maintaining an uplifting and balanced state of being in your personal space. Palo Santo is a mystical tree that grows on the coast of South America. Palo is loved by many for its energetic, cleansing, and healing properties, and is also popularized for its heavenly presence in keeping your energy grounded and clear. Burning Palo provides an uplifting scent to raise your vibration and is also beneficial for relieving stress, anxiety, depression, and emotional pain. Palo Santo is also known for relieving symptoms of the common cold, headaches, and asthma. We offer Palo Santo in resin, powder, or by the stick. Go to onlinevibes.com for all of your vibration elevation needs and receive a free stick of Palo Santo with any online purchase over $25. Shop onlinevibes.com, that's onlinevibez.com, and get your vibes on today.
UFOcongress.com is where you go to check out the Guinness World Record's largest UFO conference. The next event is going to be held February 14th through the 18th, 2018. At UFOcongress.com, you'll find out why so many people go to the UFO Congress. It's because we have the best speakers, the most amazing venue, and very affordable prices. Don't forget the website's UFOcongress.com. We look forward to seeing you at the next International UFO Congress.
Your official contact for the best alternative talk on the planet. KGRARadio.com.
Welcome back to Phenomenon Radio live exclusively on KGRARadio.com. It's time for the final segment of the program with tonight's very honored and special guest, Stan Gordon. Here's Linda Moulton Howe.
Thanks, Race. And Stan, I was looking at your website and I was so intrigued that on January 10th, 2017, that you've got a story about, quote, flying humanoid reported in the Kentucky, Ohio area. You and I have talked about Thunderbirds for a long time, but this is brand new. Can you go into this in some detail?
Yeah, well, I deal mainly in Pennsylvania, but I do get input from around the country. And I talked to this fellow, gave me an in-depth account of what had taken place. This was, again, January 10th of this year. And he told me he was driving eastbound on Route 52. He said it was a very desolate section of road. He said it was about a quarter mile from the Ohio River. And from what I understand, it's on the Ohio-Kentucky border around Ashland, Kentucky. And he's riding down the road that night. He said it was a cold, it was a misty rain. There were very few cars on the road. And he said suddenly, only about 35 to 40 feet off the ground, he observes a silhouette in the approaching traffic light. And then he has his headlights on, and of course he saw what appeared to be a large humanoid creature with huge wings. And he said he could see the humanoid body. The body itself, he says, about 5 to 5.5 feet long. The skin color was dark tan, and he said it definitely was not dark black or dark brown. The wings of the creature were estimated to have a wingspan of 12 to 15 feet. He saw no feathers, and only appeared to be skin on the body. And the witness said he observed it for several seconds as it approached him, passed directly overhead. He stated he never saw the wings flap and that the wings were spread out. He did notice that the joints of the wings were very pronounced and the legs were held together and held back, and that the arms were held along the side of the body, extended to around the thighs. He said he heard no sound during the few seconds that he observed it. So it was just a few second observation, but he was able to get some pretty good detail what he saw.
Stan, was he able to see what like that guy at the intersection, that the wings, that he got to see the wings rise up high and come back down and keep doing this, which is what astounded the young man in the story I was telling you about. Did this guy, in this case, did he get to see these massive wings move up and down?
No, he said he never saw them flap, that they were spread out and held out the whole time he saw it.
It's amazing that there could be aerodynamic motion if the wings are not flapping.
Yeah, under the topic of what we call Thunderbirds here in Pennsylvania, a lot of the reports I get, they're just huge, overgrown, generally dark brown or black, massive birds. And just like with UFO sightings, very difficult to judge altitude and size, but in some of these cases, these huge birds were very low to the ground, and in some cases they're actually on the road where they were blocking the road. The vehicles couldn't pass. In a couple cases, they were eating roadkill. I remember one case from West Virginia. I interviewed the guy several years ago, and early morning on a 2-lane highway, and he's riding down the road, and he has to hit his brake because there's this huge, gigantic bird that stood at least 4 feet tall. He gave a great description of this thing, but he said he just could not believe the massive wingspan. He said he kept watching this thing flapping its wings, hopping from one leg to the other, trying to get off the ground. And as it's flapping its wings, he could see the ends of the wingtips, and he could see the gravel and the dirt flying up. And he went back the next day to measure it. It was 21 feet across.
Wow. Wingspan 21 feet. That really is sort of from one side of a country road to the other.
Yeah. And it was amazing. So you get these giant bird reports, but then some of the reports are more like gigantic bats that have no feathers or just leathery skin. There have been numerous cases. One case in 2008 down in Washington County on a major highway in the afternoon. We had reports that people were seeing this huge giant, like a giant bat about 100 feet up, came down within 20 feet of some of the cars. People were pulling their cars off the road to watch it. One guy was seen with a camera taking photographs of it, but he's never come forward. I'd like to see those pictures. And so that's something. And then some people, when I talked to over the weekend, I was at a very big local event, and many, many people came up to me sharing even some of the recent accounts. I probably had at least 4 people independently that told me about seeing thunderbirds in the area. And one woman who I'm going to be interviewing, but I've had other reports around this area, she swears that what she saw very low above her car was a pterodactyl. And I've interviewed numerous people who have given me a detailed account, some who are very familiar with prehistoric animals, who swear that what they saw was a pterodactyl. And then you've got the flying humanoid reports that come in. And we had back several years ago, back in 2011, up in Butler County, we had a very, very interesting case that has become known now as the Butler Gargoyle. And we've heard secondhand reports earlier this year that allegedly has been seen again in the area, though there's no way to confirm that at the time. But it was a really interesting case. This was a businessman who I got to know very well. I've interviewed him many times, met with him personally many times. And early morning hours, he's riding on a rural road between Chicora and East Brady in Butler County, north of Pittsburgh. And he says he's riding down the road when all of a sudden he sees something on the right side on the grass, and he thought it was a deer. He stepped on the gas to move a little closer, and whatever this thing was, it was hunched down, and then it stood up. And he said this thing was very tall and muscular, and he had high beams on it, and he watched as a creature walked in front of a big yellow reflective road sign that was over 8 feet tall. And it crossed the 2-lane road and 3 long steps and continued off into the woods. And he said to me, he said, I've heard stories that people claim that they have seen Bigfoot in this area, but he said, this was not a Bigfoot. He said, this thing has a humanoid figure. It was at least 8 feet tall, but appeared to be covered with smooth, leather-like skin that was either dark tan or light brown in color. And he said the creature never looked at him at all. He observed it from the side. He said the head appeared to be kind of flat in the front section, then rounded out. He said it was like an aerodynamic helmet, and that the top was not quite a point, but looked like a ridge on top of the head. And the face was flat, and the eyes were not clearly defined, but he thought that they appeared to be pointed in the corner. The ear was observed on the left side was long and flat, came up and back, was pointed up backwards like a flap. The arms were very muscular and a little longer than that of a human. The hands looked more like claws, but the number of fingers was not clear. And he said the one trait that really stood out to him was the muscular, very muscular legs. And he said it was hard to explain, but the legs did not move like that of a human, and they looked like they were bent backwards. And he said also he saw what appeared to be wings on its back, which were tucked into its body, with the wingtips extending towards the side of the head. He noticed no unusual sound or smell, and he went back the next day and measured, and the sign was just over 8 feet tall, so this thing was just a little bit taller than that sign. Interestingly, within days, a number of other people up in that area were calling the local BORU group, the Butler Organization Research the Unexplained, and they were reporting similar sightings. And some of the reports from these people were really amazing. Here's one account, and I'll read this to you here. This was up in one of the little towns near there. 2 witnesses had just left the ice cream stand, headed for Reimersburg, when they noticed something crossing the road. They came to within 35 feet of the creature. They stated it was at least 9 feet tall, had dark brown skin, long arms, and broad shoulders, had a pointed head. It was moving again in front of them. And anyhow, there was a flat forehead, pointed ears, what appeared to be wings on its back. The body, they said, was really muscular, and there were 4 finger-like claws on each hand. The eyes were squinted but swept upwards at the corner. As the creature turned, the whole body would turn. The movement of the arms was not normal. The mouth looked like a slit. The wings looked like see-through mesh and resembled wings on a bat. The claws were black as coal, and the witness stated that this thing looked like it came straight from hell.
My God, what a description. Well, in a kind of a distant way, it reminds me, I was in Puerto Rico in 1996 investigating the Chupacabra attacks there. Yeah. And I was at a home where they had 2 very large dogs. And to their shock, the man, I remember, was an eyewitness. One of the dogs had a yelp, and the man came running, and he sees what he at first thought was a bat. Huge wings. It is whatever this is right down on his dog's neck. He can see that. And the man is afraid. He's actually afraid, but he doesn't want his dog to die or be hurt. So he starts running at the dog and whatever this was. And that's how this man told me. Linda, it looked up at me as I ran toward them, and those eyes were red, like red glowing street lights. He said it would absolutely stop me in my tracks. I have never seen anything like it. I don't know what it was, but as I stopped, this thing let go of the dog and flew away, flapping these black leather, no feather wings, or whatever you want to call it. And he said, reminded him of a bat. And then he now has his dog in his arms, and at the backside of the neck are 2 puncture holes. They were 1/4 of an inch in diameter. They went into the dog about 1 inch, both holes. There's no blood. There's no fluid. And the day I was there, 2 holes were still in that dog's neck. It had happened only about a week or so before. They were closing up. But he said to me, with that kind of anxiety and frustration that humans feel in the face of this, what was this black thing with wings, with glowing eyes that he said looked like they were electric red, that did these 2 puncture holes in his dog's neck?
Yeah, interesting. And of course, historically, with a lot of the Bigfoot reports, you've got those luminous, glowing eyes. In fact, I've talked to witnesses who have been very close to Bigfoot in daylight, and some of them talk about the luminosity of the eyes, even in daylight. Like the lighting was almost like artificially produced. And we hear so many of those reports of the bright, glowing orange or red and the bright green glowing eyes, like the eyes of the creatures that were seen in the famous Uniontown case. And some of the other cryptids, you get the glowing eyes as well. The Black Panther sightings we keep getting, which some of those reports are very strange and unusual. There's a whole different aspect of the Black Panther sightings that, reported in Pennsylvania year after year, even this year. And, we don't have black leopards or black jaguars here in this part of Pennsylvania. And some of those cases strongly indicate that there's something more to them, maybe than some of the flesh and blood explanations, and something that's not well known. But historically, in Pennsylvania and other parts of the country, sometimes when you have a localized outbreak of phenomena going on in a certain area, not only do you get Bigfoot, a report of Bigfoot sightings, but you get other cryptids, such as Black Panthers, being reported, and there are some instances where 2 different cryptids have been seen together, such as Bigfoot and Black Panthers.
Yeah, and in England, that Dartmoor forest that is so famous historically for all kinds of weird things. I've seen a photograph that a farmer took, and it was like a black cat. I mean, the longest body, I think, way longer than a normal black cat. But the farmer who got this photograph said that after he had taken the photo and he's watching this mammoth black cat, it seemed to evaporate, was the word he used, evaporate in the air. And Stan, we're right back that things that pop in and evaporate, how can they be strictly flesh and blood from our planetary kind of matter system? It is as if things are moving dimensionally in and out of some other place, coming in here and disappearing. And we've been talking now about these black wings and things that seem to be ominous. But in one of your recent reports at your website, this appears to be a story about something that had beautiful pale green iridescence of wings, and your title was Mystery Oversized Moth-like Creature Reported in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and actually that happened up towards the Allegheny National Forest. I was up there several weeks ago speaking at a Bigfoot event. So you're looking up around Tionesta, up around Kinzua Dam. All those areas are fluent with reports of Bigfoot encounters, UFOs, cryptids, all kind of weird things going on for years and years. And I interviewed a number of people up when I was up there who have been having recent Bigfoot encounters up in that area. But this was something completely different. I've interviewed this couple a number of times. They live not far from the Allegheny National Forest. And on July 8th of this year, and they live in the forest area, they encountered something they could not explain. And the wife, 9 o'clock that morning, wife was out on the deck of the house, and on the post, the woman noticed what looked to be a very large, oversized moth resting on a 6x6 vertical post. The moth looked to be about 11 inches long and about 5.5 inches wide in the area that was described as the shoulders. The overall shape gave the impression of looking like an hourglass figure. And if you go to my website, there's a drawing of it. They also noticed that there were either two antennas or pointed ears located around the top of the head that appeared to be about 1 inch in length. The head appeared to be tucked inside the body while it was resting. The observers estimated the wings would have been about 15 inches when open. The wife called her husband out to also look at the creature. And the wife thought that it was beautiful and that the color was kind of a pale green iridescent on the outer part of the wings and a cream color skin texture in the middle. The man said he was amazed at what he saw, and he never seen anything like it before. They said the best way they could say that was like an overgrown moth, but the witness also said to me, said, it looked like what you might think a fairy would look like. And, you know, I have one of those reports in my Astonishing Encounters book. I was reluctant till I talked to that witness, and that was such a detailed account. That's another story. Anyhow, the couple had to leave the home for a while. Before they left, the wife went to the house to get a camera to take a picture of the strange winged creature. The woman stood about a foot away from the creature and turned on the power switch for the camera, but it would not turn on. The camera had always worked well, so they replaced the battery. The camera still would not turn on. The next day, they tried the camera again, and it powered up as normal, worked fine. When the couple was walking to their car, they noticed a second similar winged creature resting on the outside wall of their home, about 10 feet off the ground. When they came back, both of the creatures were gone.
Wow.
Now, this is kind of interesting with the malfunction of the camera. Maybe coincidence, but in more recent years, and again, I heard this years ago, there have been numerous incidents, especially with low-level UFO cases in recent years, where people have attempted to take photographs of low-level UFOs with their phone cameras or digital cameras, and the camera would malfunction.
That's right.
I had one case last year up in the mountains, up towards Donegal. Beautiful morning, guy sitting by his window drinking coffee. All of a sudden, it got almost jet black, like it was a terrible storm. And he called his dog, and his dog wouldn't go out with him, which was so unusual. He stepped outside, walked outside, and 500 feet above him is this huge, solid, triangular object that's hovering there, making absolutely no sound. He had just grabbed his fully charged cell phone camera, he aimed his camera at it, and it immediately completely discharged all the power in the battery.
And you know that problem in keeping batteries charged has happened in crop formations. It has happened at animal mutilation sites. When 2020 first came on as a TV show back around 1979, it was the same time that I decided that I had to try to get to the bottom of why were all of these animals dying in Colorado, where I was director of special projects at the CBS station there. And I didn't know if it was a government project or what, and I wanted to get the answers. And my audio guy on another subject told me he had just come off a shoot for this brand new show, 2020, and that when they would have all of their battery packs, which we had to use back then, charged at night, and they would drive to where there was a mutilated animal, they couldn't get one single battery charged belt to work. And he said they were making calls back to New York saying, we charge the batteries, but we have no power and we're out in the middle of nowhere. And he said this happened 5 or 6 times to the point that it became so spooky. And here is this professional crew working for this New York production company, and they couldn't keep their belts powered up. And to this day, those kinds of anomalies of power drains at animal mutilations and crop formations that happened over and over. Stan, do you think though it's happening because we are dealing with other dimensional insertions, that when the other dimension inserts into this dimension, there is some kind of automatic physics that causes some kind of power drain?
Well, as I mentioned before, I have no doubt that there's an energy connection to the phenomena we're dealing with. And I think as our science begins to progress, I think we're going to begin to have some answers as to what we're dealing with, hopefully.
What do you think when you speculate?
Well, all I can say is, we can speculate forever. I don't have the answers. But it's happening not just with UFO cases, it's happening with the cryptid cases as well. And many people in the paranormal field tell me the same thing happened with them when they're dealing with haunted phenomena, that they're having a lot of cases where they're having power loss as well. So there's something here that might be common to various phenomena, and we just have to look further into it to find out what's going on.
Well, dimensional penetration is probably going to be a subject we're going to hear more and more about, because the physics and the papers are moving that direction. And it would be the idea we're in one dimension. Let's call our dimension middle C on the piano. And that right next 9 millimeters away, somebody in NASA told me, is another dimension. And it could be C sharp. And then there is another dimension, and it's D. And if you went up and said 88 keys on a piano, white and black, that it would be a metaphor for a true insight about how the big cosmos with a capital C is constructed, and that the key, the literal key, are the frequencies of each dimension, and that some dimensional intelligences can penetrate other dimensions. And we right now, as Homo sapiens sapien on Earth, unless the government is doing it secretly, it's a technology we haven't mastered, but the physics is taking us there. And that means, Stan, that maybe what we're going to do is get a breakthrough about other intelligence in the universe, but not just this universe, but other dimensions that might go on infinitely. And that is the kind of phenomena that you and I have been trying to understand for a very long time. And I want to thank you so much for coming tonight and sharing these fascinating encounters and your research in Pennsylvania. And with everybody understanding, it isn't just Pennsylvania. These are phenomena that are taking place around this planet in both hemispheres. And thank heavens you are there in Pennsylvania trying always to report the facts, even if they are as highly strange as anything anybody could ever imagine. Thank you, Stan, for joining Phenomenon Radio tonight.
Thank you for having me on. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
We'll do it again on the next batch of new cases as we move into 2018. Let's do it again in a few months.
All right. Sounds like a good time to do. Have a good holiday, by the way.
Thank you. Onward.
Thank you, Stan. Thank you so much, Linda. Next week on Phenomenon Radio Live, Nick Redfern rejoins the show to talk about his new book, New World Order. We are certainly looking forward to this interview. For John Burroughs, I would like to say that hopefully in the coming week or two, we're going to have an update from John. I had talked to him yesterday, had some good news from some of the preliminary medical reports that have come back, and we're real excited about that. Still some to go, but hopefully we can get an update from him real soon. For Linda Moulton Howe, our very special guest, Stan Gordon, I am Race Hobbs, and our prayers are with you, Brother John, as always. Thank you all for listening right here on Your Contact that brings you the very best in paranormal radio topics live on the internet. We're KGRARadio.com. Have a great night and a great weekend, everybody.